Welcome to the shop, guys, for part 2 of the C5 Z06 Harmonic Balancer install. You may recall in part 1 we left off when we removed the Harmonic Balancer bolt. That last 3/4 of an inch, the threads were kind of funky. Not stripped, but kind of funky. A lot of things have happened in the last week, and we're going to pick up where we left off next.
Toys for life.
I talked to the owner about the problem, and what I'm going to do is pull off that harmonic balancer. I'm going to take this good bolt, I'm going to cut some grooves in it and make essentially a thread chaser. I searched online and I could not find a chaser in this size, so I'm going to have to make one out of this old bolt and see if we can't clean up those threads. Next thing I'm going to do is just clean this off really well so I don't get any debris past the crankshaft and that seal. Totally degrease the face and the end of the snout. Now we'll use some duct tape to prevent anything that might possibly get in there. Okay, I've got our thread chaser greased up. The grease helps catch any debris, and we'll turn it in a few turns and then turn it back a little bit, and we'll see how that goes. Okay guys, I've cleaned out the threads inside the crank with electric spray, which is essentially a solvent, compressed air. I did that twice. I cleaned the bolt as well that we ran through there, the homemade chaser. It had little chunks of metal in the grooves and the grease, which is exactly where it's supposed to go. And here's the $1 million test. And the threads look really good, by the way. Beautiful. I couldn't be more happy. Guys, one of the great things about working on a 20-year-old car is you never know what you're going to find. As I poked my head up in here closer, I found a glob of RTV hanging by a thread. As you can see, at some point in this car's history, a harmonic balancer failed and ground a groove through it must have been the timing cover and the oil pan. Clearly they put on a new timing cover, and for the oil pan they sealed it up with some RTV. So we're going to clean this area thoroughly with solvent, a little 120 grit sandpaper, so the new RTV has a good surface to stick to, just in case there's a little pinhole leak here. So just sitting here over the last couple of days while we're waiting for parts, we've got water weeping out of the water pump seal. This is the opportune time to put a new water pump on, and they're not terribly expensive, about 150 bucks, and being as how we've got the whole front end opened up here anyway. Guys, finishing up the water pump install, it really is super simple. 6 bolts for the water pump to the block, a couple bolts for the thermostat housing, and a few hoses. And I just want to remind you one thing, real men use torque wrenches. These little bolts are too easy to break, guys. Thermostat housing is 11 foot-pounds. And the bolts that hold the water pump to the block, the first pass is 11 foot-pounds, followed by 22 foot-pounds. All right, back to the harmonic balancer. Next step is to remove the seal, because you always want to put a new one in when you're doing this job. Next, we're going to go ahead and just clean the area that the seal was in to make sure there's no debris. Guys, there might be a time and a place to be cheap, but not with harmonic balancer seals. I like to coat the outer edge with a little motor oil to help it slide in place. Get it started by hand, and then finish the installation with a seal installer.
Honey, I think the harmonic balancer is ready. Can you check on it?
Here's the fixture we're going to use for pinning the crank. This screws in, and the hole is used as a guide to drill a hole between the crankshaft and the harmonic balancer for the pin to reside in. Honestly, this is a lot scarier looking than it really is. Just take your time, lubricate the bit once in a while, and keep measuring the depth to make sure you go to the right depth, which is just a little bit deeper than the pin, preferably between the ledge on the crankshaft and the ledge on the harmonic balancer. Keep drilling with slow speed, a fair amount of pressure, and oiling the drill bit frequently. And then using a different drill bit, keep measuring your progress to make sure you don't go too far. We're at a point now where I'm going to take off the fixture and check on the depth. Alright, it's time to test fit the pin. I've gone ahead and used compressed air and solvent to thoroughly clean the crank bolt hole and the pin hole, and the pin fits exactly as it should. Now you'll remember when I first removed the harmonic balancer bolt, we had this kind of messed up thread here a little bit. Not stripped, but not perfect. You'll also remember we made the chase tool to clean up the threads, which they did nicely. And after further discussion with the owner, we decided to go with the ARP crank bolt. And we decided on this for two reasons. First, ARP bolts have an excellent reputation in the automotive industry, and it's our understanding that the bolt is just a smidge longer, and if that's true, it might actually allow us to grab another thread or two inside of our slightly less than perfect crankshaft. And for us, that would be a good thing. Second, the torque spec from ARP for their LS crank bolt comes in at a fairly reasonable 240 pound-feet of torque, and I'm pretty confident that the Z06's crankshaft will be able to hold that just fine. Now, there's nothing wrong with the factory GM crank bolt, but anybody that's ever installed one per the manual understands that it probably far exceeds 240 foot-pounds of torque. Now, the reason I say probably is because the torque spec for a brand new GM LS1 crank bolt is as follows. First, you install the harmonic balancer with the proper tool and make sure it's properly seated. Then, you take your old crank bolt that you just took out and you torque it down to 250 foot-pounds. Next, you remove and discard that bolt and you grab your brand new GM crank bolt, and this is a torque to yield bolt. You tighten it to 37 foot-pounds, and then you have to tighten it an additional 140 degrees. And anybody who's ever successfully done this would guarantee you that it far exceeds 240 foot-pounds of torque. So guys, I placed the order through Summit for the new ARP crank bolt this past Monday. And it is now Friday evening, and it appears as though, unfortunately, the U.S. Postal Service may have lost my package. So this is where we're going to have to stop for now. Guys, if you learned anything from this video, please hit that thumbs up below and consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching.